Good day, everybody. Justin Wilken. I've been a member of the PE Chess Club since the late 1970s, where I was a very young boy, and when the club was still at the YMCA in Havelock Street. I've seen many members enjoying their chess, some legendary guys, which we might discuss in a separate video. And I'm still a member since returning to Port Elizabeth, with the club now being at the Dyers Club, and it's a pleasure for me to do this video. I know that it wasn't a hard guess for most people who know me that my first video will be covering a game of Boris Spassky, one of the world champions, but perhaps, in my opinion, deserves a bit more respect, and therefore I'm discussing him under the unknown, or more sometimes the forgotten heroes of chess. Boris Spassky is still alive, but in his youth was a tremendous player who had a plus record against most players. And today we will have a look at a game between Boris Spassky and Bent Larsen, which was played a long time ago. And an interesting fact, few facts of this game. The first one is that Bent Larsen played board one for the rest of the world against Russia, and Bobby Fischer, who is well known for beating Boris Spassky and sort of tarnished his legacy, was playing board two. In other words, Bent Larsen was no mug. And in this game, a second interesting fact is that Bent Larsen played an opening called the Larsen opening, which is also sometimes named the Nimzowitsch opening. So Boris Spassky a few times in his career beat people in their own openings. Bent Larsen, obviously, the opening was named after him, and therefore one can assume that he knew it quite well. The opening starts with b3. Now the nice thing about this game is not very long, yet it is quite good. And Bent Larsen, later on in his biography, said that this game almost ended his career. And besides the two players playing today, we have to remember that the loser in a game of chess always takes it very hard. And remember, Bent Larsen was good enough to be board one ahead of Bobby Fischer. He was a good player. He had a bad day, and he lived to fight another day. So that's the first lesson I want to give you. If you want to carry on with your chess career and enjoy your chess, you must make peace with the fact that you are going to lose every now and again. And losing to a good player, especially Boris Spassky, he knows how to play chess. It's not the end of the world. You can go back and find out where you made your mistake and come back and play better next time. So in this position, you'll see the first couple of moves by Boris Spassky, who's playing black. Even the youngest member at our club will find these moves, and they are all within the principles of chess, which is fantastic. You could look at any world champion or top class player, and they will follow the basics from the start till the end. They never seem to have a piece out of place or out of play at all, or non-developed or not developed. All right, so the first move, as easy as pie. Black takes the center and prepares to develop his bishop, perhaps his queen, and takes a good hold on d4. The game, the first couple of moves after bishop b2, black has easy development, and that was the criticism on this game on Bent Larsen, was that he made it too easy for black to develop his pieces and just to have a free game. And if you allow that, the stronger player, or a world champion strength player, will always psychologically be very happy if he's playing black and he gets to develop his pieces and castle and arrive in the middle game with no problems. He's probably going to outplay you. And you sitting on the white side, if you've played your opening and you've lost your initiative, it's almost, even though position might be fairly equal, you feel like you've missed your chance and that you're now on the defensive. And that's the same for all of us. Doesn't matter what level you play at. So, okay, knight c6 to protect the pawn. And after that, Bent Larsen plays c4 to attack the center and hold back black's ideas of playing d5. Okay, so very simple. Like I said, an under 8 kid would play the same for black at this point. And therefore, Many people spend a lot of time on openings. You'll see how simple black made this look. And even though white is an expert at this opening, it's him who went wrong, because black, through very simple developing moves, got a good position, and white got his train of thought mixed up and went horribly wrong a little bit later. All right, so after knight f6, Bent Larsen, who was a bit of a chameleon player, tries something. He lures black's pawn forward. Now here's another lesson in that when we play chess, we always want to develop our pieces as soon and as possible in as few as possible moves. But the opposite is also true. If you can stop your opponent from developing his pieces or hit one back, it's got the same net result. If we look at this, white has two pieces, a knight and a bishop in the game, and black has two knights. So by playing his pawn forward, Boris Spassky now attacks Larsen's knight that has to move, and he plays to the center. Okay, so now, do we trade or not? Obviously, in this position, you would like to develop another piece, and that's what Spassky did. He played bishop to c5, attacking the knight twice, and now it has to be Larsen's choice to decide what he wants to do. So he doubles black's pawns, and Spassky has a choice. Does he take with the b pawn or the d pawn? In this position, we have now the positional way, which is capturing towards the center, but we also have a massive lead in development. If you have double pawns and you've got a massive lead in development, your opponent might never have a chance to come and attack your double pawns, or even if he wins one, he might not have time to chase his extra pawn through before he's checkmated. And that's practically what happens here. After d captures c6, black has opened up for his bishop and his queen on the file, and white has to make a move. We can see that black is now already standing better in the development standings. Although, remember, development is temporary. So if white gets out, he might yet be okay, because black does have a pawn structure with double pawns and a well-advanced e-pawn. But we see in this particular game that white never gets back to use his pawn structure. He goes e3 to cut off the black bishop, and white now has to make black has to make a decision on what next. And as simple as bishop f5, black is still playing moves that anybody can understand. Puts his pieces in places where they can attack the center. He's overprotecting his e-pawn, he's eyeing the d3 square, and he's waiting for white to make a plan or to find a way to make it difficult for him. So after queen c2, white moves his queen early. He's still stuck with his two rooks on the back, his knight and his bishop, and he's not castling yet. So after queen c2, black plays a good move. He has a lead in development. Boris Spassky plays queen e7 with the idea he can still castle both sides. He's still eyeing h4 for later on, and maybe a few other tricks, which I don't want to mention now because it's going to be part of your question just now. After queen e7, white is trying to catch up his development and plays bishop e2, after which black has now got to decide which side does he castle, right? When you have a lead in development, you can often strive for castling opposite side of the board, and this is what's going to happen in this position. Black castles queen side, and white now has to try and stop black's attack. Black, has now got to find a move after f4. We can see that white is slightly behind in development. Black has castled, he's got all his pieces in the game. He even moved his queen, which is quite safe on e7, so that's fine. And what do we do now? After only a couple of moves, 10 moves in fact, it's here where we might find a few of Spassky's moves, and let's see who can find it all the way through. If we look at the chessboard, as we all know, it has 64 squares, of which 32 is open when we start, and 32 are occupied by pieces, 16 of your pieces and 16 of your opponent's pieces. If you lose a pawn or a piece, you are more than 95% sure to lose that match. But the chessboard can be cut into 4 more squares, whereas we have from e8 to h8 to e5 to h5. The square over there will be black's king side. From e1 to h1 to h4 to e4, that's white's king side. On the left hand side we have white's queen side from d1 to d4 to a4 to a1, and we have black's queen side from a8 to d8 to d5 to a5. So there are 4 miniature chessboards, and if we have a look at this position, white's king side, e1, h1, h4, e4 are not very well occupied by his own pieces. He's moved a pawn in front of his should be castled king, and is also opening his king where it's standing in its starting position. So Spassky plays a very boyish move. He plays knight g4, looking like a beginner's move. We all know this move, looking for forks, etc. This move is a bit more tricky than the normal when we play it. It opens up for the queen that might come and check on h4, and white now has to decide what to do with this knight. After playing knight g4, white decides to play g3, and that pawn move is to prevent queen h4 check. However, if we look at Larsson's play on the day, he has only 3 pawns, he hasn't moved, and the rule, even if you're top class, if you're number 1 for the rest of the world against Russian team, you can't break the rules. He's made 5 pawn moves, which has slowed down his development. He hasn't castled, and it puts him in a very difficult position. If you look at Spassky's position, he had 1 forced capture. You can't give away pieces, d times c6, and the rest of it is only moved an e and a d pawn. The other moves he used to develop his pieces and to get his king safe. So one of the problems when you move a pawn for no reason, yeah, white had a reason, but it's a pawn move nonetheless. And one of the reasons you mustn't move too many pawns is that you are moving closer to your enemy territory. And this pawn on g3 that white has just moved is blocked as well. It's a terrible place for a pawn to be. And I call this sort of the Red Riding Hood theme, or the Red Riding Hood effect, where little Red Riding Hood went into the forest and almost got eaten by the wolf, whichever story you know. And that is what Spassky does straight away. He unleashes his rook, opens his rook and plays h5, coming for that pawn on g3 that will open the files and make life very difficult for white. And here we have what we later on heard was called a toilet move. If you push h3 or a3 or h6 or a6 for no good reason, you could be punished. Even if you don't lose a piece or a pawn, that waste of a move could be very, very catastrophic for your game. And Larsson played h3, thinking that black's knight would retreat and then he would be okay. Here comes one of the most well-known combinations. You'll probably find it in most chess books, but it's nice. The story behind the game, we have 2 of the top players in the world at the moment, at the time the game was played, and to win like this is tremendous. You have to have a lot of confidence. You have to enjoy your chess, because if it goes wrong, we all know what it feels like to lose. And when you are the world champion, the pressure is tremendous. It's far harder for a world champion to make a silly mistake, overdoing an attack, than for us mere mortals. So he worked it out very well. And after h3, black played h4. And immediately we remember the book by Nimzowitsch, who tells us the story of a pawn, and the further it moves up the board, if it can stay clear of being captured and it can get to the other side, it gets stronger and stronger, because this pawn has got 3 squares to go, then it will become a queen. Now taking the pawn is no good, because the queen will rush in and the h3 pawn will be very, very bad. And there's also f2 going to fall with the queen and the knight, so that is no good. Larsson decided to go with what he planned. He attacked the knight didn't move, so he captures the knight with the pawn. H takes g4 and attacking the bishop. So here comes that very dangerous pass pawn. Spassky plays h takes g3, and the pawn has got 2 squares to go before it queens. So, not wanting to swap the rook off, if white swaps his h rook off, black will just replace his rook on h8 with another rook, and white's other rook on a1 is completely trapped in the garage. That's not going to be able to help. White will be mated soon. So the natural move, rook g1, and Spassky must have thought he's a piece up. Sorry, Larsen must have thought I'm a piece up. I'm attacking another piece. I could be okay here. And if queen h4, maybe we can run away with the king. But Spassky found a very good move. We must remember the value of the pieces here. We have sacrificed the knight, which in my book is worth 3 points. And a queen, which is the pawn on g3, if the pawn becomes a queen, will be worth 9 points. So we've given away 3, we could get 9, and if we don't checkmate, we should still win the game, because you've got an overwhelming material advantage. But even a knight plus a rook, 3 points plus 5 points is 8 points, which is still less than a brand new queen. And that is what Spassky realized in this game. He plays his rook to h1, sacrificing a whole rook, which has to be captured. If king f1, the queen will enter on h4, followed by g2, which is just lost. And the problem now, what to do, right? So after rook h1, if rook takes h1, g2, and the rook has to go somewhere. If the rook goes to g1, we play queen h4 check, nothing to block the check. The king has to escape, and after queen h1, white is lost. So we go back. By this time, Larsen had realized that he made a few mistakes, and he played rook to f1. But after queen h4, it's still lost. If the rook goes to f2, we have g1 queening. So after king d1, pawn takes rook, queening, bishop takes queen, bishop takes pawn check. The king can't return to e1, the queen is cutting that square. And if he blocks with the bishop, we have queen h1, checkmate. If he tries to run away by playing king to c1, we have another problem with queen e1 check, and if the queen returns to d1, queen takes d1, checkmate. So this was a tremendous loss for Bent Larsen, and a legendary player. Maybe the young ones won't remember him. You can't do yourself any harm by reading up on Bent Larsen and going through some of his games. Like I said, he didn't always play this badly. And of course, he didn't always bump into a Boris Spassky that was really in the mood to play well. And I hope you've learned something there, that a pawn that becomes a pass pawn can win you a game. Even though the pawn is no longer on the board, the checkmate was made possible because of the very dangerous pawn that black had. We can see that because of all white's pawn moves, his rook hasn't developed, his knight hasn't developed, his bishop's back where it started, and he never castled, and he paid the price. If you play the opening principles the right way, not even Spassky can beat you in 17 moves like happened here. Develop your pieces, get control of the center. There's 4 central squares, D1, D4, E4, D5, and E5. Get control of them, at least 2 of them. Get your pieces to attack the center and get them out one by one. Don't play with only one piece. Castle your king to safety. Don't push too many pawns, and don't move your queen too early. If you do that, you cannot get into trouble so soon. It will take you 17 moves just to do that. And of course, Bent Larsen knew this, but at top level, psychology plays a big part. And he probably, we make a move hoping that it will work and that our opponent might be put off playing some moves and that we get into a good position. But stick to the principles. It pays off better than doing something funny. Especially if you're young and you're playing a strong, experienced player. Stick to the basics and try and play some good chess later on. Build yourself a foundation to get into the middle game and even the end game that follows, right? We know that our fellow club player, Jesse, has already made a video on the end game, and very, very important, those end games. But if you mess up your opening, you might be lost in the end game. So important. Go and look at that end game and look at the opening, and then we'll get to the middle game in our next video. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.